I would like to go ahead and call to order this regular meeting of the Darien Board of Finance for Tuesday, July 20th, 2021. Thanks, everybody, for coming. As we've done in the past, we'll start off with public comment. Jim, do you see anyone raising their hand for a public comment?
I do not. If there's anyone that does have public comment, just press the raise hand button in the bottom right-hand corner of your Zoom screen.
Okay.
I don't see any.
All right, terrific. Let's move on to transfers. We've got 3 in here. So the first one are some employee benefits transfers. Eileen.
For fiscal 21, this is a request to cover accrued leave redemptions. We had budgeted $100,000 for fiscal 21, but we actually only $257,050. We're requesting a transfer of funds from the salary accounts in departments that had separations to the accrued.
Hold on one
leave.
second. So if you're not speaking, could you please mute your line?
David, I think that was you. I just
Yeah,
muted you.
Terrific, thanks. Okay. I'm sorry, Eileen, please go ahead.
We'd like to transfer $157,850 from the salary lines where the separations occurred and left a surplus. And also $14,000 from medical insurance. That also is due to separations that left surplus in the medical insurance account. We want to move that over to accrued leave redemptions to true it up.
Okay, so the bottom line is with the departures, we've got to pay out leave, but we're going to save money by having lower salary benefits accounts. So this is just simply a transfer from those accounts to the accrued leave account, and net it's a wash.
Correct.
Okay. Questions on this transfer? Okay, motion to approve? Okay, Rob, second. Jim, all in favor? Dan, you good? Okay, terrific. Okay, next up is, so we've got various departments. These are going to be, well, quite a few things. Eileen, go ahead.
Yep, this is another transfer for fiscal 21. This one is $24,061. It's to cover contractual increases for the Public Works, Parks and Rec Union for fiscal 21. The union contract was approved after the fiscal 22 budget process. So the wage increases were budgeted in contingency, and now we'd like to move them over to the salary accounts to cover the deficits in fiscal 21 where we paid the retro payment.
These are pretty typical transfers. Anytime these accounts are funded during the budget season, and anytime there is a contract approved, why we go ahead and make these transfers. So, okay, so this first one then for $24,061. Any questions on this transfer? Motion to approve. Yeah, Taylor.
What was the balance in the contingency account?
There's a summary of all those contingency account
That's almost
balances
the
Yeah, I
in
think
the
it
financial
leaves,
report.
I want to say it leaves 35.
And so are we anticipating to use more later, or is that going to leave a balance of 35?
Right now, there's a balance of 35 in case.
And this is like a one-time thing, right?
Yes.
Okay, other questions? Motion to approve. Francis, second. Paul, all in favor? Dan, you good? Okay, terrific. Okay. Next one up, emergency management, program expenses.
I have that one here as well. This is for emergency management. It relates to the COVID testing site that we had at Darien High School a little early on in the pandemic. We used, it was for tent rental and portable toilets at the site, causing Mark to go. He only had we only budget a small amount in his program expense account, and we just didn't foresee needing.
Right.
So $5,447 will cover his deficit there.
And come out of our contingency.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, we all know about this. Any questions? Motion to approve. Okay, Rob, second, Frank. All in favor? Dan, good, thank you.
Hey, John, just
Yep.
because our board members who join via Zoom can only hear via this,
Okay,
so it's a little bit hard for them to hear what's going on down there, so maybe we'll just quick re-summarize if they can't hear something.
okay, fair point. Thanks for letting me know that. Okay.
The public can hear you via 79 on that.
Oh, but Dan and
But,
Kate,
our-
they can't.
our board
got it.
members.
All right, terrific, okay. Okay, so we've got, next transfer up is police commissions, various accounts.
That is Kate.
Did you say police communications?
Yes. Oh, sorry, yes, police communications. Kate, you got that?
So that is me. As you know, when we budgeted for fiscal '22, we included 3 new dispatchers, the midnight shift. We plan to hire them in January of '22. The assumption, the reason we put it there was we often have difficulty finding qualified candidates. It's a long process to hire them. So we felt that that would give us the time to hire them. We had a dispatcher, one of our existing dispatchers, resign in the late spring, and when we did the search to replace him, we found 4 really qualified dispatchers. So we want to grab them. And so what we're asking for tonight is funding that would allow us to hire the replacement and one of the new ones as of August 1st, and then 2 other new ones as of October 1st. And the reason for staggering them is based on our capacity to do training of new dispatchers at one time.
Okay, the only question I have is just the amount. So this transfer says, and this is all fiscal '22, the transfer says $57,627 I'm on contingency, but if you look on
Yeah.
the contingency schedule in our financial, first page of the financial report, it says $27,627. It's a $30,000 difference. Is that split between fiscal years, or am I missing something?
No, it is not split. I'm thinking that must be an error in your contingency schedule.
Eileen, do you see that?
I do.
Okay.
Apologies, that is an error.
Okay, so which one's right? The 27?
57 is
maybe?
right.
All right. I gotta go for the lower number, Francis, come on. Okay, so that's a correction to the contingency schedule, and it should be 57,627. Okay, Jim, do you see that?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so just to summarize for everybody, this is a transfer from Board of Finance contingency, and this is relating to the accelerated hiring of these civilian dispatchers, because we found quality candidates and no reason to wait. Better to bring those quality candidates on board now. So that's the purpose of the transfer from contingency, and then it is covering various elements of their compensation. That's not budgeted, which is why it's coming from contingency. Anybody have any questions on that?
I've got a question for Kate. Kate, is it likely that the police overtime numbers will go down as a result of this?
Yeah, but quite frankly, we're not going to see a decrease in police overtime at this point. We have 2 vacancies in patrol, and we have a number of officers who are out with injuries, and I think only one of them is work-related. There's a couple out with non-work-related injuries. So we are short with patrol officers. So while this could possibly cause a reduction in police overtime, you're not going to see that account go down overall.
Kate, am I wrong by thinking, I think the overnight shift right now is staffed by police officer? Does that sound right?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that
Is
question.
the overnight shift staffed by uniformed officer now?
It is currently staffed by 1 uniformed officer. So this would actually give us 2 dispatchers on the midnight shift, where right now, I believe that the majority of the time it's 1 uniformed officer.
So, but to his
Yeah.
point, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Other questions?
And Kate, just to reconfirm, in the budget, we had exactly 6 months for the other 3. So to the extent they get hired a little bit earlier or a little bit later, we could have to draw a little bit more on contingency or free up some within that budget item, right?
Well, our plan is, one of the new ones starts August 1st. The other two new ones start October 1st. So yes, any deviation from that would be a greater draw than this.
Okay, so this is including all the known hires you have coming before January 1, right?
Yes,
I think you actually got 4. You got 1 vacancy, 2 are starting August 1st, 2 are starting October 1st.
Yes.
That's, okay.
Okay, other questions? All right, motion to approve? Rob, second, Paul, all in favor? And Dan? Good, okay. All right, next up, Fire Commission Capital, so this is fencing construction. I'll admit I don't fully understand this one. We've talked about this before. Eileen, or gentlemen, you guys want to talk about it? Sure.
Sean Volan, treasurer for the
Sean,
Fire.
nice to see you.
Nice to see you for the Fire Commission. So basically, Kate can fill you in a little bit more, but basically, a couple years ago, we went in, we requested money to replace the drill tower fence for security purposes.
I remember that.
And basically, after finalizing the bid proposal and going out to bid 3 or 4 times, we came up with an overage. So there's two separate numbers. One's for the actual fence, and then the second part of 9,800 is for a motorized gate. Because we've been having issues with outside vendors not locking the gates up at the tower to keep the place secure.
These non-firemen simply can't be trusted, can they?
Correct.
Did everybody on, Dan, did you get all that? Or,
Yeah, I get the gist of it, yes.
okay. All right, so would this be the final cost to get this fence completely straightened out?
And we have the final bid and all that, we're just waiting for all the transfers. This is the final transfer.
Okay. Questions for Sean? Okay. Anything else understood? Just keep the gate working. I don't want to hear anything more about it. Okay, motion to approve. Paul, second. Taylor. All in favor? Yeah, great.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Sean. That's good. Okay. Main course on the menu tonight. Norton Heights Fire Department capital ladder replacement, $1,301,000. Okay, Zach, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Okay.
My name is Zach McEwen. I serve as chief of the Norton Heights Fire Department. As mentioned, here to answer any questions about the transfer request that we've put in for the new apparatus. This money would be used to replace our 1988 Max CF ladder truck. A good point that was brought up in the Board of Select meeting was that it's a dual-purpose truck. This truck has a ladder on top, but also has a pump. But I'm happy to answer, to the best of my abilities, any questions.
Do you have any pictures?
Of the new truck?
Yeah.
So we don't have any pictures of the new truck. We haven't gone out to bid yet. So this has been approved through the Fire Commission, Board of Selectmen, pending approval tonight, and working with the town administrator. Once the bid specs are finalized with the appropriate language, it'll go out to bid, and then the town will receive that bid, and then we'll move forward with the build of the new apparatus.
And are there many suppliers for a truck like this?
So, yes, yeah, there's many companies that build fire trucks, across the country.
Okay.
But this type of ladder, combined ladder, pumper, truck, how many are there that you would reasonably look to move to contract with?
So we're open to, whoever can meet the bid specs meet that specification that we have. But, it's not like buying a car, there's not that many dealers and of that nature. I expect at least 4 or 5 of them to meet our specifications.
I feel like
Go ahead.
sorry. That number of 1.301 has been out there for a while. Are we confident that's what it's gonna cost, or?
So I personally, being a resident of this town, I hope it costs less, but the issue at hand is fire trucks aren't getting any cheaper, neither are cars. We've seen that price, go up over time. That number will be sufficient for what we are looking to purchase. We can see these trucks, they range, depending on who builds the truck itself. Does that answer your question?
I mean, like, when was that number decided on, and is it still
So-
current?
That number is still current, yes.
Okay.
That number, it was agreed upon by our committee, but more importantly, the town with the apparatus replacement fund included, a 3% increase, I believe it was per year, just to keep with, the times and making sure that it will be sufficient funds in the future. It was part of a schedule that was put together, I believe, by the fire marshal some time ago. I'm not exactly sure when it was put together, but.
Chief, what happens to the old one? Do we sell it?
So that's a really
perhaps?
great question, and that was also addressed at the Board of Selectmen meeting. There's many things that I know of that have happened in the past. Trucks have been traded in. Trucks have been donated to departments in need. The problem that we're going to run into is this truck is 33 years old. It's at end of life in the fire service. I mean, as you can imagine, it's a very large vehicle to one store, and what use does it have outside of being fire apparatus? So what I discussed with the Board of Selectmen is, we have to see who bids on the truck and see if can we trade it in? Can we get money for it? The prices vary so much on used apparatus, especially one of this stature. Being in 1988, I could see it go anywhere from $1,000 to more than that. I just don't know. I don't have an answer until it went to auction or something like that. We just don't know.
Right.
It's a good question, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Where are you on just a process standpoint? So we've known about this replacement coming for a while. You guys spec'd it out, preliminary pricing of $1.3 million. It's gone to the Board of Selectmen. That's been approved. It comes up here for approval. Once there's an appropriation for that, you can take that appropriation out and go bid the truck. Where are we on establishing, say, a building committee for this? Was that discussed in the Board of Selectmen, or I missed that meeting? Where is that process? Anybody know?
When you say a building committee, you mean on the town, on the town level?
Well, the idea was that in the rethink of the fire apparatus reserve, which we did as part of the budget process, that we would start to treat these projects a little bit differently. So in other words, instead of just having an appropriation for that, and then the fire folks would manage the entire process and actually purchase the truck, that we would create a building committee, almost akin to what we have for, buildings in town.
Correct.
Okay, so where does that stand?
My understanding is that this, as you stated, this has been in the works for a while. And my understanding was once the apparatus replacement fund was once it was diminished, and, the future trucks being purchased would be addressed differently. And, as the selectmen pointed out last meeting, that they would like more insight onto what goes on with, our committee and, how the process works and how can they get involved and how can we kind of collaborate together, which is absolutely understandable.
Okay.
Well, I think one thing to think about is, so from a process standpoint, previously when, the town would generally contribute 500,000 or so to the replacement reserve, those became appropriated dollars by the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and ultimately the RTM, and therefore those could be sort of used for that purpose. You were in this sort of in-between phase where we've consolidated a lot of the reserves throughout town to sort of be more efficient, and this one's now sitting in the Board of Finance capital reserve as appropriated funds, so we'll have to approve it. I know this is...
Right.
But going forward, with the, I think many boards have considered bonding the fire trucks, particularly the larger ones like that. As part of that bonding process, not only do you need the Board of Selectmen to approve it, the Board of Finance to approve it, but ultimately would go in front of the RTM. So I think the thinking was, given that this is, there's going to be a lot more steps in the approval process, it may make sense to have, some more representation or just an involvement as these trucks are being designed and built.
Sure.
So that when it comes in front of the various bodies and so forth, you'll have kind of received input, whether it relates to financing or other aspects of it along the way. Is that fair?
Yep.
Thank you,
Is
Mr. Payne.
Kate still on?
Yeah, I was gonna, is Kate, are you still on, or did she drop off? She might have dropped off.
If I could say,
Yeah, go ahead.
I did speak to Jen, who said that nothing's been decided yet on establishing the committee for
Okay,
the
okay, that's fine.
building.
And then the second question, where are we in terms of bonding for all of that and making a decision on that?
Well, yeah, and I guess that's one question to talk about here is, although we have the money in, previously accrued and it's sitting in the capital reserve right now, for an expenditure like this, we could consider passing a bonding resolution if we wanted to have the option to bond it. So if we wanted to pass a resolution, whether, we have to talk about when the first dollar would be spent here, Eileen, right? But if this board wants to pass a resolution so that we have the option to bond it and then send that to the RTM, that would then give us the ability, if, I think up to 2 years after the project is complete,
Yes.
to raise if we needed to.
So what's the process in terms of buying the truck? Do you have an advisor on this? Do you?
So we're very fortunate. We have a lot of our older members. We have a gentleman that's a trained fire mechanic that's worked for the city of Norwalk, since retired from there. And our committee is based off of past chiefs, active members, firefighters, officers. And, obviously the first decision is always, can we salvage what we have? Can we, refurbish? Unfortunately, this truck's already been refurbished. And its age alone, you have to plan for the next, we've kept the truck 33 years, you gotta plan for the next 33, that's kind of my mindset on it. But that committee meets, they have discussions on, how has our district changed, what is this truck gonna look like? And how is it gonna meet the needs of our department, and how is it gonna meet the needs of, obviously, the town of Darien, which we're serving. So we've been meeting for over a year, and generally, we write the specs ourselves, so I hope that answers your question.
So in other words, just to pick up on what Jim was saying, we don't have expenses in advance, if you will, of ordering the truck or signing a contract for the truck.
When would the first dollars technically be spent on a down payment, on a deposit for a design or firm or law firm to?
So it would take time to, see who comes back with, who bids on the truck, who the bid is accepted, When the bid is accepted, it's gonna be a discussion with that company of, do you need the down payment, or, it's, obviously this is the town of Darien, is it, at the end when it's accepted, that's a question I don't know, I can't answer that right now.
When do you think you would actually send out the final specs to all these different firms? And when do you think you'd actually get the feedback, like in terms of timing?
If you may, I passed you Bolin, he was in the process for our last truck.
So basically, the process is we've already have our bid spec almost finalized. It's sitting with Kate right now going through that. So I'm gonna assume within the next month and a half, she'll get it back to us. We'll make our corrections, get it sent out, and then it's gonna be at least bid for 30 days. So we're probably looking at about, I'm gonna say realistically, a 2-month process before we finalize, get the actual final price and all that, and then we'll probably about 3 months need some kind of some kind of check or something for the down payment and all that. Give or take. Just it depends on how quick Kate can get us back the specs.
So if that's the case, could we vote to approve this tonight? That would be an appropriated amount, because it's coming from our capital contingency, right? Is that correct, Eileen?
Yes.
So it does not have to go to the RTM. So at that point, it's sort of a final vote. This is an appropriated dollar amount for that. Since they're not gonna spend anything until September, could we then, because I don't know, we don't have a written bond resolution like we typically have.
Correct.
So what we could do at the August meeting is get a bond resolution to give us the option of
Exactly.
bonding for this.
Yes.
And there would be time to bond this, is that correct? There'd be time to bond this
Yeah.
with an August resolution before they spend money, is that right?
Well, I think once we pass the resolution to bond, we actually have, I think, up to 2 years to issue bonds. You know, so we don't have to raise the bonds ahead of time, if you will, to pay for it. We can always pay for it out of cash, and we sort of would reimburse the general fund or the capital fund
Sure.
for that. I guess my one question would be, from a formality standpoint, in order for you to ask for bids, you have to send out the bids to all the bid specs to all these different firms. Do you need to have the money already approved by the town before they will bid on it?
I think that's the
I think
sequence of
that's
this, because it was the same problem with Ox Ridge, right? There was
Yeah.
no way we could get, nobody would entertain a bid until they knew that the full $63 million was appropriated.
Yeah.
So that's why that went in that particular order. I suspect for something like this, that's the case. I don't know.
That sounds correct to me, and if you want to send me an email,
That
I can
would-
get you an exact answer. But at this time, I don't know.
Okay, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, that was exactly my question, which is the sequencing here, because typically, and this is not typical, I get that, but typically, the bids go out, we get a number, all right, we're gonna enter into a contract with this vendor for this amount, we bid it out, this was the guy we choose, and then we appropriate, right? After we know the exact cost. And this is kind of in the inverse order. So John, I'm assuming that your sense, which is you won't be able to get those bids unless the money is already appropriated because of the scale of and the customization of this is why it is in reverse order. I just like to confirm that because I mean the actual number could come in very differently, hopefully lower, but could come in very differently, and it's not good. And money is for stages, but somewhere 60 days out.
Yeah. Well, although, Dan, I do think these dollars, this $1.3 million, because it's in the the Board of Finance capital reserve, are appropriated dollars already. They're just not,
Yeah.
right now they're appropriated, I mean, they were originally appropriated for the fire reserve, now they're appropriated into the capital account, and then we'd be moving them from the capital account to the,
Right, which is sometimes the same process other capital projects go through. And this one's in the other order, and it's probably for very good reasons. I just want to make sure I understand what those reasons are. That's all.
so it sounds like there's two things we need to figure out. One, are you able to solicit bids on your truck specs, knowing that these dollars are appropriated but haven't been moved into a project account?
Right. My understanding from Jen is the transfer, the flow is the transfer, then it can go out to bid, then the work. And we
Yeah.
can do a bond resolution for the RTM for September. Transferring the money doesn't stop us from
I think
bonding
that's,
it.
I think this is the right sequence, right? We should vote to appropriate this now from Board of Finance capital contingency. That gives him the appropriation to go out and start the bid process. In August, we come up with a bonding resolution to give us the option to bond this.
Mhm.
And then we see what the Board of Selectmen wants to do on a building committee to help provide input to the process, both the bid process as well as the actual execution of the truck, and go from there. That's that right?
Who else has to approve the bonding resolution?
Well, the RTM has to approve the
Yeah,
bonding
that's what I-
resolution.
Yeah,
But not this transfer, because it's coming from.
no, I
Right.
get
So I guess,
that.
Eileen, my only question would be, in terms of the bonding resolution, can that happen after we've moved money into a construction account
Yes,
and before they've actually signed a purchase contract?
sure.
Okay.
And if we move it into that construction account, can we pull it back if we decide to bond? Like, is there any problem with that, once it's
No, we
been
can-
appropriated for the purpose?
Yeah, no, we can bond it after.
I think
We have a number of projects that we haven't bonded yet that we are gonna be including in the fall.
And then in the bonding in the fall, this would just be part of that, so this is okay.
Yeah.
The money can
And
go
then
back to being
one
unrestricted.
last question.
Dan, go.
If this actually comes in at 1-1, so we're gonna move $1.3 million into a truck purchase account. if we come in $150,000 less, is it simple to transfer that back out of that account and back into, I guess it would be our general reserve, since we're doing away with the fire apparatus?
Well, it would be back to the Board of Finance capital contingency.
And that would be straightforward?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I had one more question. Do fire departments generally use agents in terms of purchasing these vehicles? People that are sort of knowledgeable about the supplier, the industry?
Are you saying like early on in the process?
Yeah.
Having like a contractor come in
Yeah, I'm
and
just-
kind of guide the way, per se?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know the exact answer to that. There's many different departments. As far as, you know,
Okay.
we have such a great team that, you know, we haven't had to look for contractors of that nature.
Maybe just one question back to the actual truck and away from the financing is, you're just given all the new buildings that we see popping up in town, and some of which are gonna be the tallest buildings that we had in town. With this 75-foot ladder, like, is that designed to facilitate like the needs for those type of taller buildings?
So that's a really great question, and this came up at the Board of Selectmen meeting. And so when we look at the town's fire departments, we have 3 departments, each has a different tool for the job as far as ladder trucks, aerial devices go. Noroton has the longest ladder. You know, they have bigger setbacks being in their district, with the commercial properties that they have being off the post road and that nature. Now, if we look at the Noroton Heights district, a lot of small driveways, the Allwood section of town, very tight, narrow. You know, this truck is designed to get up into the driveways where the longer trucks will not fit. So to answer your question, you know, yes, it is designed for, you know, the Heights Road project. It is maneuverable to get to the places on the parking structures that we can drive on. We can't drive on all of the parking decks that are being built. But as far as that area, yes, we can reach where we're gonna need to reach, and then supplemented, you know, either with our truck going into Noroton's district or Darien's district, or vice versa, them coming into our district. We have the tools that we need if we do have a fire or a rescue of that nature where you need a specific longer ladder or shorter ladder.
Yeah, it is interesting for these new projects. One of the insurance requirements, obviously, is that you have adequate town fire protection for those assets. And I'm just kind of wondering if, as a general matter, the insurance companies that are insuring all 3 of these developments have signed off on that. That's not a question. It's
Yeah,
I'm
you know.
not asking you, but I'm sure that's the case, but it's worth confirming. Okay.
And I guess the last question, in terms of the garage where this is housed and so forth, the length, the height, all of that, would it require any modifications to the floor or the garage doors? Or
So, yeah, that's a great question. We've specified this truck to overall length be shorter than our current truck, so it'll fit lengthwise. You know, we want to be able to get under bridges like the Post Road Bridge downtown with the railroad tracks. I believe that's a 11-4 bridge. We want to be able to get through all of these areas. Obviously, the railroad bridge on Leroy, we're not going to be able to get underneath. There's a few apparatus that do, but there's a workaround to that. You can drive the opposite way. We don't plan, you know, they wouldn't be fitting the specifications that we've written if it just won't, you know, we won't accept the bid at that point, because we're not going to tear down the wall at the firehouse or build a new floor, you know, to fit an apparatus.
Speaking of which, you guys redid the floor at Noroton Heights a
We
while
did.
back. Is that all holding up still?
So far, yeah,
Okay, good.
looks great.
Okay, this is a complex project. They're expensive, but they're scheduled. We know when these types of changes and improvements are coming. Any further questions for Zach and team? Okay, motion to approve. Paul, second. Rob? All in favor? Dan? Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
A lot, Zach. I appreciate that.
Take care.
Okay. We've got a few other salary transfers. We're coming up on these now just because it's for the current fiscal year. This one is for raises for town hall. Eileen, you want to take us through this one?
Yes, sir. This is fiscal '22 salary increases. We budgeted in the salary contingency accounts, and now that performance reviews are done and increases have been calculated, we're ready to move the exact dollars into each department to cover this year's increases.
Okay. Again, these are normal transfers. Any questions on this one? Motion to approve? Rob, second. Frank? All in favor? Okay, great. Okay, last transfer. This is for planning and zoning and their final conversion to the OpenGov software for $9,700. Eileen?
Yes. This is, Jeremy would like, he's actually at the building in other meetings, and he's happy to come in and talk to you guys. But
He
I
should have
can
come to
present
us.
it.
This is a much more fun crowd than the Board of Finance.
would you like him in?
No, it's fine.
No.
Okay.
Not for this.
He would like to transfer 9,700 from contingency to enable him to extend the old contract with CityView just for 3 more months while he's working out the details of the new implementation to OpenGov.
Yeah, this is pretty straightforward. Just to repeat, they're finalizing the transfer to OpenGov, but it was a little slower than they'd anticipated, and so he wants to have a little bit more time for parallel processing between OpenGov and CityView to make sure they have it right. So that's a perfectly reasonable request. Any questions? A motion to approve? Jim, second. Frank, all in favor? Dan, good, okay. All right, that's it on transfers. Next up is to discuss information request for pension overview. So we had talked about this a little bit last time and had talked about it with Paul, who's our rep for both the town and the police pension boards. And we haven't had this in a while, but the purpose of the review would be just to give the Board of Finance a bit of an update as to how things are with our town pensions. So as a reminder, there are 2 separate pension funds. There's one for town employees and one for police. And there's a few other funds in there as well, but it's all managed by this board jointly.
They're OPEB
Yeah,
trusts.
other post-employment benefit trusts that are associated with both town and police, so all 4 of those. So there's 2 boards, town pension board and police pension board. They meet jointly, and they're the ones who are responsible for overseeing this. And what they do is oversee really the third parties that manage all of this. And so there's a separate investment advisor that really invests the money according to a policy that's set by those 2 boards. And then there are a set of assumptions that the town and police pension boards votes to maintain or to have in place that govern how our contributions are made to those funds to ensure adequate funding. And when I was on those boards, we undertook a review of all that with the third-party actuaries. And the purpose of that was just to update those assumptions to make sure we had stuff that was as close to market as possible. That process needs to be undertaken kind of periodically. And so what I thought would be useful would be to have Paul kind of coordinating presentations by some of the same third parties that come to the pension boards themselves to update us on those 2 topics. One is how are those funds performing against the benchmarks that have been determined by the town and police pension board members, and how are we doing, right? Are we, what does performance look like against those benchmarks, and does our investment, assuming still Boston Partners, what do those guys have to say about any of that, and how do they see things, and do they have any recommendations that they've discussed with the town and police pension boards in terms of changes to investment policy, that sort of thing?
We met this afternoon.
There you go. I'll let you talk in a minute. The second point to talk about was just where you are in terms of any updates to those actuarial assumptions. So these are assumed rates of returns, rates of mortality and morbidity, and there's rates of marriage. There's I don't know, I seem to recall there's 10 or 15, 20 of those little assumptions in there that the actuaries will tweak periodically. It'd be interesting to hear the actuary just come in and talk a bit about that in terms of their assessment as to where we are on those various metrics. Pretty important, given how fast some of that stuff can change, to just take a fresh look at that stuff. So I don't know if anybody has any comments. Those were the things that were of interest to me that might be useful to have an update on. Paul, comments? What do you think?
Well, nothing right now. The actuarial stuff, I Tony Yezzi lives around the corner from me, so I can drag him in here. He was an actuary for 30, maybe 40 years.
He was on the board when I was there, he's
He
fantastic.
can take you through all the exciting
Good.
exploits and mathematical convolutions.
Tell Tony I asked him nicely, so.
Okay. The performance has done well. We've outpaced our benchmarks, and but I want to get into the actuarial to see how much we have funded.
Okay.
I assume it's well funded. It's probably 80 or 90% versus other towns are down around 50%.
Right, okay.
I think that's one thing I'd like to see, is that where are we funded relative to other sort of similar towns? And then the third piece I think would be very helpful is, when you look at it on an annual basis, the amount, what we include in the budget to sort of, deposit into, to contribute to each of the pensions and so forth.
Mhm.
I know there are a number of things that drive that. One is the expected actuarial cost. One is just the actual withdrawals and/or deposits,
Mhm.
which are being driven by, on the OPEB side, just sort of claims against the fund.
Right.
And also, like on the Public Works Union, we just, there's certain small changes that have been made to that, where new employees are in a defined contribution plan versus defined benefit plan, so there's technically gonna be a little bit less going in for new employees, at the same time that there's gonna be a little bit more going out. I think it would be helpful to maybe to look at the 3 or 4 different variables that are driving how much we need to contribute to each pension each year, to see maybe what the variance is, what could potentially moving to a defined contribution plan, what could the effect of that be on that one pension over the next few years, assuming maybe X turnover? And then, what could if the withdrawals increased by 5%, if you just look at sort of the cost of healthcare, just so that we can understand what is like the real variability, what's a 1 standard deviation or 2 standard deviation move in fund returns versus withdrawals versus employee contributions. How does that affect, what we might have to budget for each year?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, one of the challenges you have in going from a defined benefit to a defined contribution plan is that you gotta buy out the defined benefit folks, right? Or you gotta.
Or you sunset,
or
you're
create-
sunset it.
Yeah, or some kind of provision like that, and that can actually be quite expensive, so. But it's certainly worthwhile to take a fresh look at it, because municipalities do that all the time. So anyway, that's more of a policy issue for the Board of Selectmen, so I don't want to go too far afield with that. But the purpose of this is really to give us the financial update, so we're a little bit more fluent on rates of return and actuarial assumptions, to Jim's good point, trying to get just an updated sense of what's driving the economics of that, so that we're both well informed and that there's no surprises on any of that stuff. I don't think there are, but just for our responsibility, it's probably a good idea just to take a fresh look. I'd propose doing something like this either September or October. I don't think there's any huge urgency. So maybe if you could spend some time thinking about how you'd like to choreograph that, and which third parties you'd like to come, whether it's Tony and the actuary and maybe somebody from Boston Partners, or however you want to do that. But no urgency, just whenever it's convenient in the fall, we can do that.
Yeah, the next pension meeting would be in October.
Okay, yeah,
So-
I think the timing of pension meetings is probably irrelevant to this, unless any of those guys are actually coming here in person, and it's convenient to, I don't know, because I seem to recall the pension meetings are on the same day as our meeting in October. I don't know.
I don't know if the date's been set for the pension meeting. I'll
Yeah.
check on that.
Okay, anyway, so.
I mean, if this is something that the pension board wanted to see before they presented it to us, and we could do it like.
Something like that,
Yeah.
yeah. We'll make this easy, so timing's not urgent. Okay, enough on that. Financial report, Eileen.
Okay. Financial report for June 30th is in your packets. Overall, we look good. Our largest item is tax. We've collected just over 100% of budget, so it's at $39,741,000. Not much else has changed there. On the expense side, I would like to note that there are a few outstanding items that aren't booked yet into these June numbers. They are 3 days of June payroll that was paid July 16th that have to be booked back to 21. We're still processing accounts payable invoices for fiscal 21. And we're still working with Board of Ed to reconcile their accounts to town and get a final number on them.
Just a question on the other revenues.
Mm-hmm.
It said Park and Rec programming revenue 255
Yes.
over the revised budget. What was that versus, because I know we were looking at if there was a higher number, I'm just not sure when we reset that budget. Weren't we looking at, I think, 500,000
Right.
incremental revenue with about 250 of additional expenses?
Right.
And it just, this now shows 255 over the revised budget.
Right. Oh, this is over that additional 250 appropriation. So with the added 250, there's still 255 more over.
Yeah, I thought they had, there was 250 in the budget, and they needed, rough numbers, an additional $250,000 to fund provision of these oversubscribed programs, and that the revenue was sort of separate from that. That was what they needed to appropriate as an expenditure, and that they, for practical matters, had already spent the money. And so
Yes.
it was kind of ex post in terms of our approval of that. Is that right? Directionally? I can't remember
Yes.
the numbers.
So does this, does this mean that since we moved 250 over,
Right.
the revenue account is now only 255 over budget, so the number as of June 30th was we were 505,000 over. Moved 250 out of the revenue account, appropriated that into the expense account, and now we're only 255 over?
I think that's right, yeah. Not to worry, we
Yeah,
can confirm
not
all this
positive.
next month, it's fine.
I'll have to
I guess
confirm
my
that
only
with Jim.
points were, one is, when this gets finalized, we have our usual kind of budget spreadsheet that we created that what I'd like to do is take all the finalized fiscal year data, pop that into that spreadsheet so we can just take a look at it versus, adopted budget, revised budget, and just see how it
Okay.
kind of turned out, but having a summary that we can report on to everybody in terms of how things turned out at an aggregate level, and specifically what was the change in fund balance as a result, that would be great to see. I know we're not finished with the fiscal year yet, but that'll be really good. There is there's a contribution from fund balance on the revenue page, so that's at $4.582 million. That was largely, I think, to cover the Board of Education's COVID expenditures. So I guess my question would be is if we appropriated that money, then they turned around and they spent that money, which is right. But if you look at the Board of Education line item on the next page, their adopted budget is $102 million. The revised budget's $104 million. I'm just kind of curious as to where that $4 million goes, right? So just as an accounting matter, I would have thought that would have been credited to their budget, and then they would have just spent that, right, on COVID-related expenditures.
Well, I think generally speaking, they received about $1 million in grant between ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and a couple other small
Right.
state grants. We made a special appropriation of about $1.8 million, so that's about 2.8
Right.
additional. I don't think the final number is done yet, but it looks like the excess cost reimbursement is going to be noticeably higher. And I think their last finance meeting that the board had a few weeks ago, they indicated that the current surplus that they would be returning to the town, the surplus was like $1.25 million or
Yeah, it's over $1 million. Still,
$1.3 area.
We haven't
It's in that
reconciled
zip
it,
code,
so I
that's
couldn't
right.
say.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, maybe we could just get a little better accounting of all that so I could see the flows of those grants, the fund balance appropriation, and how it fed into their budget and actual expenditures. Anyway, for later, I guess.
I do have one question, like, looking at the Board of Finance capital reserve.
Yep.
This shows that it started on July 1st, 2020 at 459,000. This is on page 19.
Page 5.
Where did you?
Thank you.
I think it's page 5.
But look, on page 19, there's as part of the financials.
Yeah, so there's the fiscal 21
Right.
capital contingency where it gives you the ending balance for the capital reserve of 2,445,
Yep.
that one.
Yeah.
And that ties to this beginning balance on the 22
Okay,
statement.
okay.
Okay, so what's the question?
Question withdrawn.
Oh, question, okay, right. No, my only, well, it looks like a small number, that's our available balance, 130,000, but remember, we took out the Board of Ed's security money out of there last month. And there was something else. What else? Oh, here it is. Yeah, this is my question. So we funded the Board of Ed's lockdown and security enhancements of $225,000 at the last meeting, but we also created that admin sort of sub-account of $35,000 so that Jen and Kate would have some flexibility to cover small items. So when that was pulled out, though, that's still a separate contingency account that they can manage. And I'm just kind of curious as to why, where that is. Would that not be on this list as sort of a separate admin contingency? This is just,
I see.
this is a minor point, it's a presentation point, because
You're
here we've got all our contingency accounts on this one page.
Yeah.
But what we did was we ring fenced 35,000 that they could use, where they'd have to come to us for a discussion.
You're right,
But
we
just,
can,
if there's a little box there that says, here's the admin contingency account, we don't have to review it, but periodically, but just as an accounting matter or presentation matter, just to have that included.
yeah, sure, we can include that next time.
Okay. And then don't forget the correction to the dispatchers there on the
Yes.
the regular contingency, that should be 57,627. Those are all the questions I had on the financial reports. Anybody have any other questions? Okay. Approval of minutes. So Dan, I thought you sent a note that says the minutes were not in there, but I see minutes. What am I missing?
That Jen beat me to the corrections, which I thanked her profusely for jumping on my responsibility there. So these are corrected for Jen. Mine came in afterwards. So
Even when she's not here, she's here. Maybe she'll watch this
Yep.
and be amused by that comment. We'll test her next time. Did you get the amusing comment at the end of the meeting? Ha, didn't watch the video. I read through these and they looked correct to me. Does anyone have any comments or corrections to the minutes?
No.
Dan, we appreciate you reading these. It makes this process a lot easier, so thank you for that. I believe we were all here at the last meeting. Motion to approve the June 15th minutes. Okay, Rob, second. Jim, all in favor? Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay. Special assignments, committee reports. Let's see. Dan, anything on your end?
Yes, there was the Oxford Building Committee meeting last Thursday. I would say work on that site is very intense as of now. There was substantial weather delays, both going back to the winter, but record rainfall. But they're plowing through it. There have been some issues with electrical, water, and sanitary sewer conduits and piping and access, and they're working all through that, but it's kind of put the whole team a little bit of a gun to their head with respect to the timing, because school's coming back. And while this part of the site will remain under construction, there needs to be access to the existing school building, so the parking lot area needs to be cleared. And so that's really what the urgency is. So just a little bit of a raised antenna around that, but right now there's a high level of confidence that things will resolve themselves by school opening. The other issue that we had talked about earlier was procurement. I think it was 2 months ago, we talked about how lumber prices had gone up fourfold. Well, they've come but we're now getting as part of our monthly reports, we're getting a breakout on procurement. We have no issues with respect to cost. We have no issues with respect to time. So those issues, that issue's has been very well managed.
Is there anything else going on that would suggest any substantial deviation from budget or contingency inadequacy or anything like that, or all still steady as she goes?
Pretty steady as she goes. I'd say that the biggest headache was really Eversource. There's the original power line connects to a transformer, and it's considered direct burial. So they refused to cut power to that line because of fears that for some reason it was corroded or whatever and wouldn't restart. And it took the team weeks of engineering, working with Eversource to kind of come up with a workaround. And they were able to do that. And in the meantime, we're powering off of a generator, portable generator. But that did whatever kind of fluff they had in their schedule dissipated. So they're still, again, confident on the schedule. Some of those costs have been reflected in some of the allowances and some of the change orders, but we still have something like $170,000 of allowances and over $1.6 million of contingency. So right now, as things project, we're still coming in under budget.
Okay, good. Any questions for Dan on Ox Ridge?
Just in terms of drawdowns of dollars and timing, just as we think about bonding coming into the fall, which is when we've typically done that, like, have we put together, an updated drawdown schedule?
Well, Jen gets that regularly, and I think as of last month, she was reporting that, consistent with your comment there, Jim, your observation that the fall would be a good time to revisit or visit the second portion of bonding for this. I don't really have an update than that, other than that she's getting those drawdowns regularly, and I'm copied on that, and I'm confident that she's on top of that.
Okay. Other questions for Dan?
Another compliment for Jen, just in case you're listening.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dan. Much appreciated, and I appreciate your service on that committee. Audit committee, anything? Should be pretty quiet.
Nothing.
No? Okay. All right. Chairman's report. The only thing I have is Jamie asked about appointing a Board of Finance member to an IT steering committee that the Board of Selectmen has chartered. I don't have a lot of details on that. Is that something you're familiar with, Eileen?
I'm not.
Okay, all right. I'm pretty sure this pertains to just taking a fresh look at everything we're doing for IT and the coordination thereof across various town entities. So probably pretty important, and I know both a source of expense and frankly a source of efficiency and better sharing. So that's a good thing to be part of. Are there any volunteers to be part of that committee?
Yeah, I'll jump.
Right. I know if I looked at him long enough, he might actually break.
Well, I was the guy for years that would complain about it, so.
You are going to have an opportunity
Right
to
up my alley.
revisit that role. My
See, I should have
gosh.
kept my hand down all those years.
Yeah,
Sure,
well,
let's do it.
yeah,
Can
saying
we
no.
vote on appointing Rob? I think that would. I'd love to approve Rob as
Yeah, I
that.
mean, maybe what we can do is to break with tradition and just vote by acclamation. What do you think? Oh, all right. So Rob has nominated himself. Can I get a second on that? Jim, enthusiastically, all in favor? I believe it's unanimous. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate you.
Rob, I got a problem with my iPhone. Could you help
Yeah,
me?
this one's cracked. I think.
Pin, and you're in.
The number you dialed has been disconnected. Okay. That was all I had for my report. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
I'll send the pension update that I received today
Oh,
to
great.
all of you, and whatever actuarial reports I have at home, I'll forward those out later.
Oh, that's great. We can read that and that'll help us get ready for that
And
session.
if you have insomnia, will help with that too.
I speak from experience when I can confirm that that will be the case. Okay, anything else for this evening? Okay, motion to adjourn? Paul, second, Jim? Okay, all in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, friends.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
And